So today's conversation would be about the hue and cry about Mauritius's inclusion in the FATF grey list. I think post budget and post the notification, we would have seen that a lot of media reports saying that FPIs from Mauritius would no longer get the treatment. All the FPIs would now have to be restructured or whatever. So we've thought let's try and understand what this exactly means, and is there a reason to worry about if you are an Indian, uh, if you are from an Indian perspective. Thanking Harish and Jugal for their efforts to get the presentation. So these are some of the terms. So anti-money laundering, BOs, beneficial ownership, CFT is combating financing of terrorism. DNFPB is designated non-financial businesses and professions. FATF is Financial Action Task Force. FDI, FPI straightforward. GAFI is Group D Action Financier. LC largely compliant. NC is non-compliant. PC is partially compliant. LEA is law enforcement agencies. NPO not for profit organization. NRA National Risk Assessment. SEBI, of course, TF is terrorist financing, and USA. So we've got a reasonably comprehensive agenda, starting from what it is, why, or recommendations, what happens when it is grey listed, what are the specific areas in which Mauritius has been grey listed for, and what they have done, and what is the way forward in this regard. So the background, FATF is a global money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog, and it's also known by its French name Group D Action Financier, which GAFI or FATF both mean the same. It's an intergovernmental multilateral body, decision-making body. It was established in '89 during G7 summit in Paris to develop policies to combat money laundering. And in 2021, its mandate was expanded to include terror financing. And in April 2012, it added efforts to counter the financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, something the term which became popular thanks to George Bush. So, what are the objectives of FATF? To develop and promote policies to protect the global financial system against money laundering, terror financing, and financing the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. There are theories that your coronavirus, as on date, is also a consequence of one such initiative. So, in this regard, the FATF has set out its recommendations comprehensively and within a framework which has been reasonably consistent over time. And it sets international standards which countries should implement through measures adopted to their particular circumstances. And the main area of focus is to confirm and assess whether member countries comply with the FATF recommendations. So, FATF has issued 40 recommendations, which sets out essential measures in areas pertaining to identification of risks and develop policies and domestic coordination, pursue money laundering, terror financing, and financing of proliferation, apply preventive measures for financial sector and other designated areas, establish powers and responsibilities for competent authorities and other institutional measures, enhance the transparency and availability of beneficial ownership information of legal persons and arrangements, and facilitate international cooperation. So, who are the members and observers? So, there are 37 member countries and two regional organizations representing the almost all the large financial centers of the globe. And there is one observer, which is Indonesia. So, to give you a perspective, India is also an observer in OECD. We are not a member. So, who are the list of 37 member countries? Argentina, Australia, Austria, Belgium, Brazil, Canada, China, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hong Kong, again under the One China policy. Iceland, India, Ireland, Israel, Italy, Japan, Korea, Luxembourg, Malaysia, Mexico, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Portugal, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, South Africa, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey, UK, and US. And regional organizations, European Commission and Gulf Cooperation Council. So by default, all their member countries would also indirectly comply. What do you mean by the term grey list and what are the consequences? So FATF identifies jurisdictions with weak measures. So you have these blacklist, which is like the high risk zones, and grey list are zones which are under increased monitoring. So, with FATF identifies jurisdictions with weak measures to combat money laundering and terror financing in two FATF public documents that are issued three times a year. It's issued in Feb, June, and October, which is a grey list and blacklist. And the grey list jurisdictions face increased monitoring, which are actively working with the FATF to address strategic deficiencies in their regimes to counter money laundering and terror financing and proliferation financing. And FATF places a jurisdiction grey list means the country has committed to resolve swiftly the identified strategic deficiencies within an agreed time frame and is also subject to increased monitoring by the organization. So blacklist includes countries with serious strategic deficiencies which doesn't take any steps to counter money laundering, terror financing and proliferation financing. And for all countries identified as blacklist, the FATF calls on all members and urges all jurisdictions to apply enhanced due diligence. And in most serious cases, countries are called upon to apply countermeasures to protect the international financial system. So if you notice, look at the countries which are in blacklist, it is North Korea and Iran. And those countries which are in the grey list are Albania, Bahamas, Barbados, Botswana, Cambodia, Ghana, Iceland, Jamaica, Mauritius, Mongolia, Myanmar, Nicaragua, Pakistan, Panama, Syria, Uganda, Yemen, and Zimbabwe. So you would see that both members and non-member jurisdictions are placed under grey list and blacklist. Of course, both these countries are not members of FATF. So when we look at the economic consequences of a country being placed under grey list, is difficulties consequent to economic sanctions from IMF and World Bank, problems in getting loans from international institutions and other countries, reduction in international trade, international boycott. And it's in this backdrop that on 21st of February, the FATF released a publication titled Jurisdictions Under Increased Monitoring, whereby Mauritius was added to such list. What are the reasons for adding Mauritius to that list and what are the action plans recommended? So Mauritius is the second largest FPI, foreign portfolio investor, into India after US. I mean, that's surprising for a very small island nation whose entire GDP runs into a few billions of dollars. So it's established as a global business sector in 92 and has now become one of Africa's largest international financial centers. It is the 20th most favorable country in terms of business environment and is the fourth largest destination for FDI in the small island developing states. Now, what are the FATF mutual evaluations? So, mutual evaluations are in-depth country reports analyzing the implementation and effectiveness of measures to combat money laundering and terror financing. Mutual evaluations are peer reviews where members from different countries assess another country. A mutual evaluation report provides an in-depth description of a country's financial system for preventing criminal abuse, as well as focused recommendations to the country. They are strict, and a country is only deemed compliant if it can prove this to other FATF members. So, what are the priority actions recommended? So, 18 priority actions were provided in the mutual evaluation report of 2018, out of which the major ones were complete national risk assessment exercise and implement a national AML or CFTS counter financing of terror activities plan of action in a coordinated manner, taking necessary legislative action to broaden the scope of preventive measures applicable for institutions, take steps to ensure that adequate, accurate, and current beneficial ownership information on legal persons and legal arrangements is available to competent authorities in a timely manner, conduct parallel investigations in general and particularly for offences such as drug trafficking, which is a high risk offence, enhance legal provisions and to make them apply against non-compliance with AML and CFT obligations, remove all legislative impediments to law enforcement in this regard, establish a regulatory and legal and institutional framework to monitor, supervise, and effectively implement targeted financial sanctions, implement the mechanism for sharing of assets confiscated with foreign countries. All these you would see very similar to your tax information exchange agreements, which are TIA clause in most of the DTAs or MLIs, as the case may be. So, based on the mutual evaluation report, which is like in professional parlance we call it a peer review, out of 40 recommendations issued, ratings for the same were provided for Mauritius as follows: non-compliant were 13, partially compliant were 13, largely compliant were 11, and compliant were 3. So it was only 14 out of 40 where they were largely compliant or compliant. The remaining 26, especially the non-compliant 13, which tilted it against its favor. So if you were to segregate, I'll highlight the larger areas of non-compliance. Applying a risk-based approach targeted financial sanctions related to terror financing and terrorism, non-NPO management, customer due diligence, correspondent banking, new technologies, wire transfers, reliance on third parties, uh, transparency and beneficial ownership of legal persons. So these are areas where there have been severe non-compliance. Again, partially compliant cash couriers, statistics, sanctions, internal controls and foreign branches and subsidiaries, higher risk countries, tipping off and confidentiality, terror financing offense, national cooperation and coordination. So, and financial institution and secrecy laws, and dealing with politically exposed persons. So these are areas where they were partially compliant, but where the FATF felt a lot of work needs to be done by the jurisdiction. So, if you were to look at the series of events which led to the inclusion of Mauritius in the FATF, first priority actions were provided under Mutual Evaluation Report 2018. First enhanced follow-up report and technical compliance re-rating was issued in April 2019. The second follow-up report in September 2019. At the end of the second follow-up report, progress of Mauritius was considered to be insufficient to address the strategic deficiencies. Therefore, action was planned to include them under grey list. So, what is the action plan which Mauritius has agreed? Consequent to this, demonstrating that the supervisors of the global business sector and designated non-financial businesses and professions implement risk-based supervision, ensuring the access to accurate, basic, and beneficial ownership, demonstrating that law enforcement agencies have the capacity to conduct laundering investigations, implementing a risk-based approach for supervision of NPOs sector to prevent abuse of terror financing. And what is India's position? See, that's more important when we are looking at it from an Indian perspective. So, if you notice, sorry, there was a lot of speculation because post Mauritius being tagged as a high risk and a non compliant or a cooperative jurisdiction, fresh investment shall not be allowed. But you must also understand India has a very strategic relationship with Mauritius. So, after FATF placed Mauritius in the list of jurisdictions under increased monitoring, SEBI issued a fresh press release providing clarity and assurance that FPIs from Mauritius continue to be eligible for FPI registration with increased monitoring as per FATF norms. Because what happens is, if you go through the SEBI's foreign portfolio investor regulations, it states that an applicant is eligible to become an FPI if it is not a resident in a country identified in the public statement of FATF as a jurisdiction having strategic AML or CFT deficiencies, or where a jurisdiction has not made sufficient progress in addressing these deficiencies. So the ramifications being put into grey list would lead concerns in terms of due diligence for investments from Mauritius in AIFs in India. Institutional investors and asset managers prefer Mauritius as an efficient jurisdiction because of low operational cost and a favorable tax treaty position. Mauritius continues to remain amongst the most preferred source for FPI and FDI. Therefore, the issuance of press release is a welcome move considering the above perspective. So, as far as the way forward, Mauritius is on a war footing to address all these issues. And once the FATF has determined that Mauritius has done so, it will organize an on-site visit since they do it 3 times a year. That the implementation of the necessary legal, regulatory, and operational reforms is underway, and that there is necessary political commitment and will. And if the on-site visit has a positive outcome, the FATF will decide on removing it from grey list. Mauritius will then need to continue working within the FATF or the relevant FSRB through its normal follow-up process to further improve the AML and CFT regime. On 4th March 2020, the FSC has confirmed that 90% of the priority actions are addressed and will continue to actively work with the government and industry stakeholders and FATF to address the remaining action. So, I mean, it's more in their interest to ensure this happens because, as a jurisdiction, financial services is one of their largest sources of employment and GDP. So, to sum and substance, friends, the placing Mauritius in the FATF list, yes, does have an increased scrutiny of FPIs into India. But the fact that the SEBI has come up with a press release makes it clear that India still views Mauritius positively, and we would accept or encourage investments from Mauritius, subject, of course, to the FATF commitments and requirements which India is bound to make. So I think this luxury is not been made openly available for many other FATF grey list jurisdictions. So these were some of our thoughts, friends, on this very interesting area of development. Hope to catch up with you again on another conversation of relevance. Thank you. Have a great day.